Welcome to another FPL video. Today we're going to cover the 4 different clubs that have had price reveals, including Arsenal, Manchester City, Brentford and Brighton. So for each club we're going to talk about the top 3 options, but for Arsenal, Manchester City specifically, we are going to actually discuss every single player that has had a price reveal so far and show their stats and talk about them in detail. So let me know what you think about each club and what you think are the best assets, and let's try to get this video to 200 likes and leave your thoughts down in the comment section below in terms of who you think the best options are and whether you're happy with the pricing. First up we have Gabriel, and I have to say I think this is a very good price for him. Once again, he's 5 million and he actually scored the most goals amongst defenders last season with 5, and you look at the underlying numbers as well, the XG is pretty decent for a centre back, 4 big chances, and as you can see there, obviously the goal tally, which is very impressive, 27 shots inside the box and 29 shots overall. Gabriel is always sought after from the corners when Arsenal take them because he is the big aerial presence, so I think amongst Arsenal defenders he's probably going to score the most goals or be second this season once again, and I think that's why the pricing is pretty good for him. He's not going to get too many assists. The only times he will probably get them is when he does a layoff from a header or from a set piece, but ultimately I think there's a good price for him and it does put him in contention for the best Arsenal assets. I still don't think he makes the top 3 though. We're going to talk about that at the very end of the Arsenal section, where I show you in my opinion anyway, the top 3 from the players that we have the prices so far. But Gabriel is a good purchase. Good start to this season with the fixtures, not just the first 5 games, but also the first 10 overall. So I think he's a good medium to long term option, and Gabriel is worth considering. We're now on to another Gabriel, but this time it's Martinelli, and I have to say, another very reasonable price. He could have been 6.5 million. I don't think many of us would have complained. 6 goals and 7 assists in 29 appearances, and some of them off the bench is pretty impressive stuff, but I have to say, maybe we expected a bit more from him in terms of goals specifically, but the assist is quite surprising. I didn't expect for him to have so many, to be fair. Good underlying numbers as well, 7.62 XG, so a bit of an underperformance there. The expected assist is still pretty decent, although there is an overperformance. 13 big chances though. I think Martinelli should have scored more goals. He did miss some very big chances, including one against Manchester City, but overall I think 6 million is a very good price for him. However, with Fabio Vieira coming in, you've got Smith Rowe on the left hand side, and let's say Arsenal do sign a right winger even, and that shifts Saka to the left, Martinelli's minutes will be reduced even further. He could also be deployed potentially as a striker, but we've been saying this for many months, and in the end Arteta went with Nketiah. Of course he got his chance, proved himself, signed a contract extension, so minutes will be the main concern with Martinelli, even if he does stay fit, and that's another concern, which would be his injury record. But overall I have to say 6 million is a very impressive price, and I think it's something that at least it gives you an option. You know, you can consider Martinelli, although he might not be your first choice, and I don't think he comes anywhere near the top 3 for Arsenal. He is still a very intriguing option overall. We mentioned him just now, Eddie Nketiah. Despite how good he was at the end of last season, I think 7 million is a tad overpriced. It reminds me of Willock the season beforehand, where he had a very good end to the season for Newcastle, and then the following campaign he was priced at 7 million, which was just a bit too much. You know, Nketiah only had pretty much 10 starts overall and 5 goals there, so a very good end, like we keep on saying. Good underlying numbers, and of course when he does lead the line for Arsenal he can score goals for sure, but with Gabriel Jesus imminently arriving, Nketiah just won't get as many minutes or at least opportunities as he was at the tail end of the last campaign, and I think 7 million is a bit too much. 6 or 6.5 would have probably been the right one in my opinion, but let me know, you might disagree, and when he does start I think 7 million is easily justifiable, but as we'll get onto later, there are other strikers around the same price and below that I think are more intriguing options that are potentially more nailed as well. So for me, Nketiah is definitely still a good option. It's not too overpriced, but I think that it's just a bit of an awkward price range for him, and in the end it's just doesn't really hit the landing in the end. Many FPL managers are intrigued by Martin Odegaard, and he's at the very forefront of their ideas and plans when it comes to Arsenal. But when I look around that price, I look at the midfield position, I still think there might be better options elsewhere. And also, with the midfield, you mainly want to spend it on midfielders that are 7.5 million and over, those that are quite consistent with the attacking returns. I have to say, Odegaard was very unlucky not to get more assists last season. He created a lot of chances, he was right up there, but didn't really have the finishing to take those chances and give him those assists. But ultimately I just don't think I'm going to seriously consider Odegaard. I don't think we should just completely discard him. It's something to keep at the back of our minds, but ultimately I look at the underlying numbers, and yes, the XA, obviously a very huge underperformance there. I think he will get more assists next season with better finishes around him, but do I think he's going to score 10 plus goals? He can, but I don't think he will. And as a result, I think there will be better options around the same price. And even just if you stretch out for maybe $1 million more or a bit more than that as well, going for more premium options, I just think that Martin Odegaard, there's not really a space for him in our FPL teams. 4.5 million is a very good price for Ben White, and once again, no changes from last season. I think it's pretty good. Minimal attacking threat, but he should play the vast majority of games. Having said that, William Saliba is coming back into the fold, and he could become a problem for Benjamin White, and it could be Gabriel and Saliba as the main centre-back partnership, and then maybe Ben White is going to play in the Cups, or it'd be Saliba playing in the Cups, Ben White in the Premier League. It'd be very interesting to see what happens from the get-go, but ultimately you look at a few other defenders for Arsenal, and so long as they stay injury-free, such as, for example, Kieran Tierney, or you look on the right-hand side, Tomiyasu, they might arguably be the most nailed in that defence, depending on who else Arsenal signed this summer. But ultimately, as things stand, Ben White is a good option. Just be careful with Saliba, who could complicate things for the England international, and it could become a very big issue where ultimately you could just find someone else who's going to be nailed and is going to play consistently at 4.5 million. And another thing to mention really, which I discussed a lot in my last video, not so much so far in this one, is that Arsenal's defence was awful at the tail end of last season. From Gameweek 30 onwards, pretty much, they only kept one clean sheet against Aston Villa, and they were absolutely atrocious. They couldn't keep a clean sheet to save their lives, and ultimately I would still be quite concerned unless Arsenal get some reinforcements, not only in the defence but also in the midfield, to offer that defensive protection for the centre-backs as well as the full-backs. So interesting one for sure, but Ben White might not be the best option for Arsenal at the back. Arsenal's new signing, Fabio Vieira, is obviously a very intriguing one. He actually won Player of the Tournament in an under-21 Euro tournament very recently, and he's got some very good stats as well in the league. He got 14 assists, and he also got 6 goals and 7 goals in all competitions. And the way he got into the team actually was from the departure of Luis Diaz in January to Liverpool. That opened up the spot for Fabio Vieira to come in, to play on the wing, to play as a second striker and also as an attacking midfielder, and he definitely took that opportunity and did very well. I think he's going to do very well in the future. 6 million is certainly a very good price for him. It's very intriguing, but it's a wait and see for me because I'm quite unconvinced if he's going to play the vast majority of games. I think he's going to get plenty of minutes and a lot of opportunities in all competitions, but in the Premier League, in FPL, is he going to get enough time to really deliver what he's certainly capable of? I'm not so sure. So Fabio Vieira is an interesting one at 6 million, but for now I think it's a wait and see. And if he has a very good start with those fixtures, he's certainly one that we can start to bring in from Gameweek 3 onwards. Arsenal are quite open in terms of loaning out Nuno Tavares, which would mean Tierney is the undisputed left back. But the main problem with Tierney is his injury record, and I think Arsenal will go and look for someone who can play on the left hand side, and that's why they're heavily interested in Lisandro Martinez, who can play as a left centre-back, a left-back, and also as a holding midfielder. And ultimately, that's why I've never really gotten Tierney into my FPL team over the last few years, because I know his quality, but I also know the frailness, really. He can get injured so easily. He's got some good underlying numbers as well. Obviously, you look at the XG and XA, it's nothing spectacular. Just over 1 in both departments in 22 appearances, but 1 goal and 3 assists. Certainly, he's got some very quality delivery. And over the years, Arsenal haven't really had anyone who can make use of that good delivery in the box because they don't have an aerial threat. Even Aubameyang at 6'2", he never really was a good header of the ball. But I still think Tierney is a good option, someone to consider, of course, as always, but it's always going to be an issue, his fitness. And as a result, I think that we could look for the 4.5 million options elsewhere in the Arsenal defence, as well as Gabriel. You also look at the goalkeeper, we'll talk about him very soon. So I just think that there's a few others that are going to play more games because they've got better injury records, and also they could offer just as much in terms of bonus points and also points overall. Similar to Martinelli, 6 million is a very good price considering the breakout season that Smith Rowe had. 10 goals and 2 assists, a very healthy return, and a lot of these appearances were from the bench. And at the beginning of the campaign, he was getting a lot of minutes, a lot of starts, but that changed quite quickly. Odegaard was the main attacking midfielder. You had Martinelli playing on the left, Saka on the right, and then things would change from time to time. But Smith Rowe was actually struggling a lot towards the very end in terms of his fitness, and that's something that, once again, a bit similar to Tierney, is going to be a bit of a cause for concern. Good underlying numbers, although there was a huge overperformance in terms of the XG, but ultimately very good when you're looking at his price, 6 million. I thought he'd be 6.5, and fair play. Once again, this is the type of pricing we do like. It makes you consider these options, even though there's a lot of risk behind them. But ultimately, you can afford to take a risk or two with players that are quite cheap. When you get to players that are over 9 million, a very premium price bracket, that's where you really want a guarantee of starts and a guarantee of results. And with Smith Rowe, he's obviously nowhere near that in terms of price, so you could afford to take a chance on him. But ultimately, I don't think he's going to be a starter at the moment as things stand. You've got Fabio Vieira coming in as well, so Smith Rowe might not be the best FPL option. We're now onto the top 3 Arsenal players in terms of those that have had their prices revealed anyway, because there might be someone else, maybe Gabriel Jesus for example, who I think will be at 8.5 million once again. Of course, we haven't got the confirmation so far, which is a shame. We've got the price reveals for Arsenal, Manchester City, and Jesus didn't appear. But Tomiyasu at 4.5 million is certainly very, very healthy, and I think it's a very good option. But just like Tierney, his injury record, not just at Arsenal, but also at Bologna, was a huge cause for concern. But so long as Tomiyasu is fit, I think he will be the main right back. Some people would question it and think, well, what if Cedric gets a game or two? And that is certainly possible, maybe to kind of alleviate the load on Tomiyasu and to prevent injuries. That could be something that happens from this point onwards. But I still think Tomiyasu is a huge upgrade on Cedric, and I think that Arsenal are a much better team defensively with Tomiyasu in the side, and you can just see the stats when Tomiyasu's in compared to when he isn't, and there is a huge disparity in my opinion based on, not just in terms of the stats and the goals conceded, but also in terms of the performances. He slots in as that third right centre back really, and it also allows the left back, which in most cases would be Tierney, to bomb forward, and that also helps Tierney as an FPL option. So I think Tomiyasu is certainly interesting, and I think he's a bit more nailed than Ben White. But then you can also look at it the other side, and Ben White is far more reliable in terms of fitness and also the lack of injuries. So Tomiyasu, keep an eye on him, but minimal attacking threat is going to be very similar to Ben White in that regard, and also his injuries are just absolutely shambolic really. Hopefully he can stay injury free because he is a quality player, and I think he could do very well in the years to come. I still think Ramsdale is a good option at 5 million, but he didn't keep a clean sheet from even before Game Week 30, which is when Leno was in goal against Villa. So Ramsdale, look, you look at the stats here once again. I've talked about him as well in my first draft video where he actually featured, but that could change, and I did make that very clear in that draft. But, the stats are pretty decent. He had a good season overall, but certainly things took a downward spiral at the very end. Very good start. I have to say, in the first half of the season, he was incredible and he made some fantastic saves, but I just don't know what happened. And maybe you could look at his career on a whole at Bournemouth, at Sheffield United. He does have these purple patches where he looks very, very solid, but he also has these quite rough patches where he could look pretty poor for a number of games. But not just that, the Arsenal defence in general were pretty terrible, and that also plays a part. When your defence in front of you are quite secure and they're not letting a constant bombardment of shots at your goal, you're going to feel more confident and you can trust your defence. You don't have that insecurity. So there's going to be a number of different factors and reasons why Arsenal and Ramsdale look much worse at the end of last season. But ultimately, I still think we shouldn't discard him. A lot of people have already. They're going with Raya, for example, and a few other 4.5 million goalkeepers. But I would consider Ramsdale, and I still think he's up there in terms of budget and in terms of value. But let's just wait and see what the rest of the prices will be for all the other clubs and all the other goalkeepers. I still think he's definitely up there. And from those Arsenal players revealed so far, he is second in the list. Just like FPL.team predicted, 8 million is the price for Bukayo Saka, and I think he is the best Arsenal option as things stand. Is he a must-have overall when you have all these other options around 8 million in the midfield? Probably not, but he is certainly right up there. 11 goals and 9 assists, a great way to bounce back after the Euro 2020 heartbreak. Very good underlying numbers, as we talked about more so in the first draft video, where he also features a really good start to the season in terms of fixtures. I think Saka could definitely kick on, and if he can even match what he did last season in terms of goals and assists and FPL points, he justifies that 8 million price tag, certainly, but there might be better options elsewhere. That is really the huge caveat. Arsenal aren't the greatest in terms of FPL and also in the Premier League in general, but I still think Saka's a great option, and I would certainly consider him in your first draft, going on and building on from that, from Game Week 1 all the way until the end of the season. I still think he's a very good option, and nothing has really changed after this price reveal. So now let's move on to Manchester City, and then at the very end of the Manchester City segment, we're going to show you the top 3 options, and then after that, it's Brighton and Brentford. Bernardo Silva isn't everyone's cup of tea in FPL. He doesn't really get enough goals and assists, but last season at one stage, he was actually on everyone's mind. He got 8 goals and 8 assists in the end, which is a very healthy return. He is a quality player, one of the best in the Premier League, but of course he doesn't really get the credit he deserves because he doesn't really get those goals and assists, those flashy numbers that really propel him up in the ranks, and also the individual player awards. But he's certainly a quality player, of course. He is actually linked with a move away from Manchester City once again, just like last summer, and it'll be very interesting to see if he actually stays in the end, because I think he has an impact on how others around him play and their FPL prospects as a result, including other midfielders like De Bruyne, Phil Foden, etc. He's not really going to be someone we're going to consider too much, but you never know, and he's certainly capable of getting some goals and huge hauls in individual matches, but can he do it consistently from game week 1 to 38? Not in my opinion, not as an FPL option. Of course, he is certainly capable with his ability, but he's not the greatest finisher in the world, and also I just think there are better options in terms of those goal output that you're really going to be looking for. So Bernardo Silva, certainly a good price for him. It's quite fair. I would definitely not price him at 6.5 million or under, but I also wouldn't put him in my FPL team. Ruben Dias is priced at 6 million. A very good way into that Manchester City defence, especially if you can't afford others like Joao Cancelo, but I still think that's a very healthy price, although the left centre-back, whether it's going to be Laporte or it could be maybe John Stones playing there, or anyone else that Man City may bring in, that could be your way into the Man City defence, which could be even cheaper, although my guess is that Laporte will probably be the exact same price as Ruben Dias. In terms of XG and XA, pretty decent numbers. 5 assists actually from Dias, a lot of knock-ons from set pieces, and he can get some bonus points as a result. So Dias is certainly a good choice, and with the start that Man City have, they're actually ranked top in the Fantasy Football Hub fixture ticker from game weeks 1 to 10, so a good medium to long-term option. You might want to double up on Man City defence and go for Cancelo and Ruben Dias. I definitely would recommend it. I think it's a really good choice, and ultimately, apart from Trent Alexander-Arnold, all these fullbacks like Reece James, Ben Chilwell, Andy Robertson, etc., Ruben Dias is one of the best picks from these top teams and a really good way into their defence. So Ruben Dias for me is certainly an intriguing option, but not in the top 3 for Man City so far. Phil Foden is the exact same price as last season at 8 million. Fair price. I still think he's definitely worth considering, and he's not really someone that I'm a huge fan of FPL wise. He's actually one of the trolls for me last season. Whenever I had him, he never really delivered for me, not only in FPL but also UCL Fantasy, and when I got rid of him or when he wasn't in my team, he would be capable of some huge hauls like he did against Brighton, for example, last season. 9 goals and 6 assists, still a very good return. Obviously, he won Young Player of the Year, and he's got good underlying numbers. He's one of the best young talents in the world, and I certainly would recommend him, and he should be entering our thoughts. But I still think there are 3 options at Manchester City that are by far and large the very best that we've had so far that have been announced in terms of prices. But Phil Foden is definitely an intriguing option, and if you're looking to double up a Man City attack, Phil Foden could be that cheap, I say cheap very loosely, but that medium price enabler in a way, and a really good way into that attack. Grealish's first season at Manchester City has been very underwhelming, and that's why he's actually suffered a price decrease to 7 million, only 3 goals and 3 assists in 26 appearances, although once again a lot of those were off the bench or with limited minutes. And I have to say though, Grealish actually made those around him play better, but in terms of the goal output, he certainly should be doing much better, just like he was in his final season at Aston Villa, where he put some very crazy numbers, including a mega haul against Liverpool in that 7-2 win. If we remember, that seems like such a long time ago actually, but decent underlying numbers. Obviously, he should have definitely performed better. In some ways was a bit unlucky, but definitely not worth the £100 million price tag. Is he worth 7 million in FPL though? That is the big question. Well, I think he could be, and he actually was 7 million in his last season at Aston Villa, and he did pretty well, all things considered. But I think Manchester City have better options in the midfield and also across the board. Phil Foden, Kevin De Bruyne, you've got Erling Haaland up front, and a few others that I think just offer better value. They're going to score more goals. Maybe in terms of assists, this is where I expect Grealish to definitely improve and probably get 7+ assists this season. But it also depends on the minutes he accumulates, and is he going to play more in the Cups or in the Premier League? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered and how Manchester City are going to line up, but ultimately Grealish is someone to keep an eye on, but as things stand, not someone that I would definitely be in a rush to buy because of his reduced price tag. The hero of last season, and to be fair, even the season before in that winter period where he went absolutely crazy and Gundogan went from a non-existent FPL option to one of the very best in the game. 7.5 million, a very fair price once again. 8 goals and 5 assists. Obviously, those 2 goals against Aston Villa were legendary in Manchester City folklore, and decent underlying numbers as well. Gundogan is quite a unique midfielder, pretty good on the ball, controls the tempo, but also can make those late runs into the box and score goals, which is something that has kind of come out of the blue in a way in the last season or two, but not really someone I'm going to consider. Gundogan is still linked with a move away from Manchester City despite his heroics, so that should be pretty interesting in terms of the football transfer sphere. But in terms of FPL, someone to keep an eye on potentially, but not really someone I'm going to be going out of my way to recommend. It's a bit of a common theme here with the Manchester City midfielders. Riyad Mahrez has gone from 8.5 million to 8 million, which definitely makes him more appealing. 11 goals and 7 assists, multiple double-digit returns, and also some 9-pointers along the way. And he's always very tempting, but whenever he does very well, the next game he's benched or he gets a cameo off the bench, and that's just not what you want in your FPL team, and for someone who is over 8 million with a very good fixture on his hands. For example, I got him in on my free hit in Gameweek 27, and it was a disaster. He didn't even start against Everton. These things are commonplace really with Pep Guardiola, especially with players like Riyad Mahrez, and I always recommend him actually in UCL Fantasy because he is the go-to guy in the Champions League but not in the Premier League, and that's why Riyad Mahrez, as much as I like him as a player, I think he's fantastic, I just can't really recommend him as well in FPL. Raheem Sterling at 10 million is a very good price. Another price decrease from Manchester City midfielder. 13 goals and 7 assists is a healthy return. Very good underlying numbers as well. And ultimately, he could be moving away from Manchester City. So let's keep an eye on that situation. And if he does go to Chelsea, for example, he could be their talismanic figure. So let's see what happens with Raheem Sterling. At Manchester City, though, once again, a bit similar to Riyad Mahrez, I just don't think I can bring myself to spend 10 million or over on someone who's not going to play, let's say, 3/4 of the games really, or at least start them. So that is a bit of a shame, to be fair. But if he does go to Chelsea, he will probably play every single game, maybe bar 1 or 2, and he's going to be one of their main men up front. So Raheem Sterling, good price, very good numbers, and a very underrated player in Premier League history, but I don't think I will be going for Sterling. 5 million for Kyle Walker is a very good price, especially at the moment, but if Cucurella goes from Brighton to Manchester City, he could be the main left back, and that shifts Cancelo from left back to right back, and that means fewer minutes for Kyle Walker. But if Cucurella doesn't go, and India and Manchester City kind of just rely on the same old fullbacks, Kyle Walker, Zinchenko and Cancelo, then 5 million for Walker could be your way into that Man City defence, especially if you don't have the funds for Cancelo or you want a second defender. So ultimately, at the moment, it looks really good, but I think Cucurella will move to Manchester City, and if not, Man City will target another fullback, and as a result, Kyle Walker won't be as appealing as he does at the moment. We're now on to the top 3 Manchester City options, at least in terms of the prices confirmed to us so far, and De Bruyne is in 3rd place, completely justifiable price tag, no problems with that, although his injury record is a bit of a concern, and ultimately, do you want to spend 12 million on someone who could be injured and you have to move him to another premium like Heung-min Son, Mohamed Salah, etc. That isn't going to be ideal, but ultimately De Bruyne, if he stays fit, is one of the very best FPL options and arguably the best player in the Premier League. 15 goals and 8 assists in 30 appearances is a very good return. Normally he has more assists than goals, but last season was a bit of a reversal in that regard. And it's kind of interesting because his XG was only 7.11 and his finishing was incredible. He was scoring long-range efforts. He was very clinical. I mean, look at that performance against Wolves. Probably the very best you saw all season. But then the campaign before that, there were games like against Southampton away where De Bruyne was missing sitters. He couldn't finish any one-on-one whatsoever. But De Bruyne certainly has it in him to be a clinical finisher, and he showed that in the last campaign, and that's why he's worth 12 million. Am I going to go for him from the get-go? Maybe not, because there's also Erling Haaland up front, and he might be slightly better in terms of value and will also score more FPL points, certainly more goals. That is what we would all think anyway, so long as he stays fit. And then in the midfield, you have Heung-min Son, as I mentioned earlier, Mohamed Salah, and a few others that you could go to instead of Kevin De Bruyne. So ultimately, very good price. It's completely justifiable, but there might be better options in terms of the premiums and in the midfield. After notching 11 assists and 1 goal, being the second highest scoring FPL defender last season behind Trent Alexander-Arnold, Joao Cancelo is completely justified at 7 million, and I think it's a great price for him. He's certainly worth that extra money over the other defenders that you're going to have at your disposal, even from Manchester City themselves. Cucurella at 5 million if he does join Man City. that could be a really good and interesting option. But Cancelo for me will be the more nailed defender. So if Cucurella plays on the left, assuming he does sign for Man City, Cancelo will be the main right back. And then if Walker's playing on the right, you would assume that Cancelo will probably play on the left, especially in the big games where Cancelo can make the difference and can also play quite a dynamic and interesting role as a kind of hybrid as a fullback and also midfielder. Very good underlying numbers for a defender. Absolutely sensational in terms of the XG and XA. I would want more goals from Cancelo next season though, and I think he will, as I said in my first draft video. So 7 million, great price, no problems with it, and I think he's the second best option from Manchester City. Arguably, Cancelo should be the number one option from the Man City options so far, but Erling Haaland at 11.5 million, I think he's just going to be in everyone's teams really. That's the way it's looking. I said this as well before. My prediction was between 11.5 and 12 million, but I was actually leaning more towards the 12 million upper bracket there. And in the end, Haaland is going to be quite cheap in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, there is the injury record to be quite fearful of in a way. But as we talked about in the first draft video, it's not as big of a concern as some people are making it out to be. Although some of the injuries he was picking up last season for Borussia Dortmund kept him out for a longer period of time. The ones in the earlier seasons were mainly just for a few days or a few weeks. But with Erling Haaland, we mainly talked about his stats as well, his goal scoring numbers in that video if you want to check that out. But just to kind of recap, last season in the Bundesliga, he got 20 goals and 5 assists in 23 matches and 27 goals overall in all competitions and 5 assists in 29. So absolutely ridiculous numbers. For Red Bull Salzburg, he had more goals than games played. And in the Champions League for both Borussia Dortmund and Red Bull Salzburg, he had more goals than games played. Absolutely unbelievable. 23 Champions League goals in 19 appearances. And he could be fighting for that number one spot in terms of the all-time Champions League goal scorer if he stays fit and if he goes to the right club. So Erling Haaland at 11.5 million is a fantastic price, and I think he's going to be in most of our teams, including my one probably in the end, over the likes of Harry Kane. We're now on to Brentford, but before I go into the top 3 options, and we have one of them on screen, I also want to highlight the other players, talk about them briefly and their prices, maybe pick out 1 or 2 potential interesting options as well, and also the position changes, which we're going to start off with right now. So there are 2 major positional changes from Brentford, and they include Canos, who was a midfielder last season, and now he is a 5 million defender. So that could be pretty interesting. He got 3 goals and 3 assists, including the first goal of the Premier League season in the opener against Arsenal. And then you also have Mbeumo, who went from a midfielder to a forward, and he started at 5.5 million last season, just like Canos, but he's now a 6 million forward. So keep an eye on that. But Mbeumo, 4 goals and 7 assists, not too bad. And ultimately, with Ivan Toney, who we're going to talk about very soon, I think he is the go-to Brentford attacker, as well as Christian Eriksen, who we don't have the price for at the moment. But on screen we have Wissa, very underrated, 7 goals and 2 assists. He did very well against the likes of Chelsea and also I think Everton as well. Very good performances, and he always goes under the radar. So from those that have had their prices revealed, Wissa would be number 3 for me. Let me know once again which changes you would make in terms of the rankings, and also which changes would you make to any of these players' pricing. But I think 5.5 million is a very good price for Wissa, although once we get Eriksen's price, if he's 6.5 million or something like that, and he stays at Brentford, he would probably pip Wissa to 3rd spot. But definitely intriguing option, keep an eye out for him. And now let's move on to the top 2. Raya is going to be probably the template goalkeeper at 4.5 million. In 24 appearances, he kept 8 clean sheets, so 1 every 3 games. Pretty good stuff for a 4.5 million goalkeeper, and an expected clean sheets of 7.49, so pretty good stats there. They kind of match there. You've got the big chances conceded, 36 in 24 games for a newly promoted side. It's to be expected. It's not too bad, to be fair. I've seen worse from other clubs, and expected goals conceded of 32. So Raya is going to be right up there. I don't think he's the best Brentford option, but second from those announced so far, certainly so. I have a few doubts about Brentford in terms of second season syndrome, which I talked about in my first draft video as well, but I still think they can do well. It's just there is a bit of doubt in my mind based on what we've seen with other clubs that did very well in their first season and then they completely capitulate in the second. Leeds are another example as well from last season, almost relegated to, but right at 4.5 million is certainly going to be one of the most owned in terms of the goalkeepers. As most of us predicted, Ivan Toney is 7 million. No complaints there, to be fair. Good underlying numbers. pretty good goal output as well, considering it was his first season in the Premier League. I think he could actually improve on that and potentially get 15 plus goals and maybe a few more assists. But it also depends on how Brentford do in their second season in the Premier League. And I think he's going to be the standout. Yes, you have Mbeumo at 6 million, but for an extra million, I think Ivan Toney is going to get more goals, maybe even more assists and more FPL points in general. We actually also talked about the fixture ticker in the first draft video, and Brentford were right up there. I think they're second over the first 10 game weeks of this season. So Ivan Toney and Raya, for example, are very good template picks, and they're good long-term options as well. So I would definitely recommend them. Would I go gung-ho and go triple up on Brentford? Probably not, but I'd probably go for one or two of their options, and Ivan Toney and Raya for me are pretty no-brainers in the grand scheme of things. So Ivan Toney definitely worth considering. Now let's talk about the other options briefly and highlight them. And they include the likes of Ayer, Henry, Janssen and Pinnock, all at 4.5 million. The main ones to really look out for there are Rico Henry and also Janssen, who had a good number of points actually, especially at one stage of the season, I think around game week 10, and he had 3 goals and 4 assists, I believe. So Janssen, obviously pretty good underlying numbers and good attacking numbers, and Rico Henry, always good on the eye. So keep an eye out for those two 4.5 million options. You got Canos obviously at 5 million that I mentioned before with the positional change. Then you have Janelt and Norgard. Norgard's very good, especially in other games like Sky Fantasy Football. They're both 5.5 million, and Mbeumo at 6 million. So we've covered all of Brentford as well, but the main ones are these three, who in my opinion are the top 3 for the Bees. Now let's move on to Brighton, and actually as we have recorded this, Leeds have also dropped their prices. Not Rafinha, but for their other options who are probably going to stay this summer, their prices have been revealed. We're going to talk about them briefly at the very end, but let's go on to Brighton and talk about their options and their prices. If Cucurella stays at Brighton, he easily makes the top 3, but because I think he's going to go to Man City, he doesn't make the final top 3 in this list anyway. But I'm going to use this section to also talk about the other Brighton players and their prices briefly, but obviously 5 million for Cucurella is a very good price, and if he goes to Man City, even more so. Hopefully he does get the minutes though, no matter what happens. So with Brighton, at 4.5 million, we have Lewis Dunk and Tariq Lamptey. Very good prices. Lamptey's always an intriguing option, but very injury prone. Dunk is very reliable, and over the last few campaigns actually, he is the highest scoring defender on the whole. So he's definitely very interesting at 4.5, and he could be someone that we get into our teams. A decent start to the season for Brighton, although Man United away is still a tough fixture, no matter what people will say to you. Caicedo at 5 million. Definitely intriguing, although not something that I would heavily consider at the moment. With Caicedo, he does play more so in defensive positions for Brighton. I would like to see him have a bit more license to go forward. As he showed against United, he can boss the midfield and can also get that goal and that moment of magic which he showed in that game. So Caicedo, keep an eye out for him in general, but in terms of FPL, at the moment I'm not too convinced, although 5 million is a good price. Then at 5.5 million we have McAllister and Pascal Grosch. Not too bad. Nothing, spectacular, but McAllister can get some goals and assists, and he does play in more offensive positions. But then you've also got Maupay and Welbeck at 6.5 million. However, the main strike, obviously the new signing from January, who's now back from loan, he's going to be the one we're going to mainly talk about later on in this video. So let's now move on to the top 3 Brighton assets before going on to the Leeds assets, briefly discuss their prices, which have just been revealed, and then wrap up this video. Robert Sanchez was a template pick last season. I had him in my Game Week 1 team, and I think Raya will be this season's Robert Sanchez. Good underlying numbers for Sanchez, to be fair, and a good start to the season, but Brentford have an even better set of fixtures up until Game Week 10, and also I think Raya has better numbers from last season compared to Robert Sanchez, although they're quite similar. So let me know what you think of Robert Sanchez. Are you going to be going for him? I think he's going to be lower in terms of ownership, and that might make him more appealing for some people, but ultimately Raya will be the template pick. Trossard was a bit of an FPL troll last season, but at the very end, he showed his class. Goals against Arsenal, Man United and Spurs. 8 goals and 4 assists in total. Most of them came in the latter stage of last season. Decent underlying numbers as well, but he is a very frustrating FPL asset. But 6.5 million is a very good price, and he outscored a lot of very popular midfielders and options in general. So Trossard, keep an eye out for him, but am I going to go for him? Probably not in my Game Week 1 team, but he's someone I'm going to have in the back of my mind because he showed what he could do, and even for Belgium as well, he's put some good performances over the summer. So with Trossard, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how it develops, but ultimately I think Undav is going to be the main Brighton asset of choice. So I just mentioned Undav, and I personally think if he gets the minutes, he is the consistent starter, the main striker for Brighton. I think he could be one of the best value options in the entire game. 5.5 million, and let's just go over his stats for a little bit. So he was player of the year and the top scorer last season in the Belgian league. 25 goals in 39 matches. If you count the playoff, 26 goals and 13 assists. Absolutely incredible numbers. He's a 25-year-old German striker. He actually joined in January, but Brighton loaned him back out to his club, which is Union SG, and then he came back. The loan obviously ended this summer, and he's now back. Is he going to start over Welbeck and Marpai? I personally think he will, but it might be a case of him sharing minutes, especially at the beginning of the season, and then maybe once he proves himself and gets those goals in, that's when he can start to cement himself as the undisputed #1 striker. But let me know what you think of that situation. Are you going to be going for Undav? And personally, we've already got two strikers that are going to be quite nailed on in most people's teams, Erling Haaland and Undav. And then it's just a case of who the third striker is going to be. Could it be Gabriel Jesus or could it be someone else? Let me know what your thoughts on all of that are. I'd be very intrigued to see. And now let's go on to the Leeds prices. Some pretty interesting ones in there. Most of it, though, has stayed the same. As you can see, we have more price reveals from Leeds United this time. Cooper, Koch are both 4.5 million. Then you've got Christensen and Roca at 5 million. The new summer signing, by the way, Roca from Bayern Munich. Aronson is 5.5 million. James, Rodrigo are both 6 million. And Gelhardt is 5.5 million. So a bit of a price rise for him from 4.5. That could be pretty interesting. But the other three that you can't really see on screen right now are Harrison, who's 6 million. You've also got Bamford at 7.5 and then Meslier at 4.5. So pretty much the same for all three of them. Bamford, a season full of injuries and disappointment for him, but I definitely think he can bounce back. He was fantastic 2 seasons ago under Marcelo Bielsa, and he could do the same under the new manager Jesse Marsch, of course. Rafinha didn't actually have his price revealed, so look, he's probably going to go off, whether it's to Barcelona, Chelsea, who knows at this point. He's linked to so many clubs, but it's going to be very unlikely that he's going to stay at Leeds. Phillips is pretty much on the verge of completing a deal to Manchester City as well. But Leeds, some interesting ones in there. I think the main ones would be Harrison at 6 million. Of course, he was another one that was fantastic 2 seasons ago. I think Bamford, if he can stay fit at 7.5, is an intriguing option for sure. And then the defenders, I'll be honest, I try to bring myself to be invested in their options, and Jesse Marsch certainly improved their defence, but I just can't bring myself to recommend Leeds defensive assets, whether it's Meslier or their defenders like Cooper. So let me know what you think of Leeds and these price rises, but ultimately there's so many that have been released today. There might be yet another set of prices after this video has been uploaded, so it's going to be very interesting to see. We're going to get some more over the next couple of days, and even as soon as next week we could get the game launched, and that's pretty much what the article from Manchester City's website inferred when it said that the full list of player prices will be revealed next week. So it could be Monday, 4th of July, it could be the very end of next week, who knows, but exciting times are coming for sure, and we will be getting what we want pretty much, which is more prices and the game, so we can start making some drafts and overthink and constantly change everything. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Thank you very much to everyone for watching this video and for just supporting the channel. As always, you can become a Patreon or channel member. It'd be very much appreciated. And let's get this video to 200 likes, and we're on the way to 15,000 subscribers. So any subscription is massively appreciated. All the best of luck for the upcoming season. Enjoy your summer break still. Try not to overthink it too much. And hopefully you just take care. Enjoy the football as always. And I'll see you next time.